So good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another of our interviews, 10 Minutes With, where we talk to industry executives for 10 minutes. My name is Ian Gillett from iGR, and today we're joined by Anton Kapela, who is CTO and co-founder of EdgeMicro. So Anton, easy question to the first one. Who are you and what do you do?
Good morning, Ian. Thanks for having me on. Of course, Anton Kapela, nicknamed Tony for some who know me. And at EdgeMicro, I work on all the technology-related fronts, the things that interface with mobile gateways and various networking elements, as well as our core data center products and services.
Okay, so EdgeMicro, some people may be familiar with you. Obviously, the name Edge implies edge compute, micro implies data center. Where do you fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah, great clarifying question. A lot of folks initially encounter us and think or get the idea that we do somehow run computers, or we are selling micro, systems of some sort, which is natural, it's fair. But rest assured, we don't. We're not that gifted or talented. That's like the application space for hyperscalers, such as Amazon and others like that. We provide the raw ingredients and the stuff to support those systems in their runtime, in their deployment at the edge. Meaning a strictly data center provider that leases space and power, physical asset space like that in key locations.
Okay, so I know we've met before at trade shows and things, and you have it's like half a container type thing that you have shipped around and showed, and it's literally half a container with racks in it, right?
That's correct, Ian. That's a while ago now. That's several years back, and that's exactly where it started. And it was a standard, ISO sized, but half format container initially. But that sort of physical space plan doesn't really turn out to be as efficient as we were hoping it was. It also doesn't get the right kind of aisle widths and heights that you want for modern IT workloads. And so, for customers, fortunately for the customers rather. This has all been redesigned with a custom-sized enclosure that fits approximately 8 racks right now, with a little bit of buffer space depending on final, T's and C's, fire protection requirements, other kinds of overhead and ancillary systems. But nominally 6 to 8 racks in the same space that we saw only 6 before, and that was tight, as you might have remembered.
Right. Yeah, it was. Good. So what's happening right now in within EdgeMicro, within the lines of business that the customers you serve? What's the latest and greatest?
Yeah, well, so the biggest announcement, biggest news, I'm certain has gotten through the press network, but they'll highlight it here again. That was an agreement with Cloudflare on the first 30 sites to be able to support their hardware deployments and initial edge, call it strategies in these locations. Mm-hmm. And really the more near term anyway, more close to what was going on day to day is the deployment work for our upcoming Raleigh site announcement. It's been announced, but upcoming turn up, if you will, call it commissioning. And prior to that, we had just completed Tampa, and a few months before that, Austin. So those 3 sites are coming up just as we're speaking right now. Day-to-day progress, even amidst the shutdown. So that's all positive. And beyond that, we have 5 more kind of in the very near, call it 90% decided, sort of barring any unforeseen sort of places that we'll be announcing shortly, probably in the next 3 weeks or so.
Right. So you and I were talking earlier, we've seen a lot of announcements recently from the big mobile operators, obviously starting to get closer to edge, but really putting their hands around the whole content idea and doing these deals with the public cloud guys. So from your perspective on the other side of this, why are we seeing that? Where do you think that leads?
Yeah, it's a great question as to why. I mean, I think obviously it comes down to revenue opportunities. The belief, the perception is that there's gold in them, their hills, and it's through content.
Right.
We've seen, people are aware, of course, that there's a Verizon Business Media thing now, and it owns Yahoo and a bunch of other brands. None of these things have really, to our knowledge in the market, radically changed or grown revenue from X to Y, and it's been great and wonderful. But I think people keep on trying it in some way, maybe with the belief that there can be a turnaround here, there can be some level of commitment or investment or corralling effect that will yield that possible upside. And so far, it really hasn't seemed to come true. If anything, it's a distraction from other good things companies could be doing in their services and their networks.
Right. So leading on from that then, You know, and you and I, again, we've had this discussion before, is if you could change one thing about where we are in the wireless industry, what would you do? How do you see it going forward?
Bring back the engineering, man. what I can't get away from, what historically, and worth mentioning here for our conversation and the folks who will watch this later, it's worth noting that I've only gotten involved in IP networks because of initial early interests in wireless networks. And the thing that they passed was this Ethernet thing that it carried IP in it. And it made perfect sense why you'd want the two to be married. And this is back before we had broadband or even 2G. This is in the early 90s when it was AMPS and even more historic protocols before that. And that got my attention because I realized there's this amazing potential here. There's amazing capacity, and our job as engineers is to find it and convert it into revenue and put services on top of it. That's the value in what we did as engineers then, and I think should continue to focus on now. Working, that's very exciting in 5G, new radio, just around the corner, massive MIMO. All these things are helping get to where I think things should be, and where the research says it can be. But the commitment to doing it is just not as clear to me as some of the other commitments and business strategies that we see demonstrated by current actions. And so if I could change one thing, it would be to try to get folks to recognize really what their job is, and that is run a great network, turn spectrum into dollars. Services on top, it turns out, I think, in my opinion, the internet does a great job of innovating there and finding ways to compel folks to want to use or do things that are novel and exciting with it. But without a solid consideration for the infrastructure as a real priority, I think we've drifted away from where I saw Bell Labs, for example, in the 90s. And I want to come back to that point. Not that it's a nostalgia, but that it's really where the rubber meets the road, if you will, in the sense of turning megahertz into megabucks. And if we can't do that, content's irrelevant.
Yeah. So do you think, and I agree with you, I mean, if you look back, I've been doing this 25 years.
Yes.
Right? But, back when I started being an analyst, we had Bell Atlantic Mobile, GTE, Southwestern Well Mobile, Pactel, Ameritech, McCaw. There were 20, 30 fairly decent sized companies. Do you think as we've got the consolidation that our operators have just got too big to innovate? Or is it more attitude?
My lawyer would say it's a call for speculation, but that's what we're all about today. So we'll go with it. So I don't know where or what might have distracted it chiefly, particularly call it, principally distracted, but certainly quarter interests are dominant. We can't necessarily shake that off. I think the consolidation made that perhaps worse because now there's fewer of them to think about, and you're not asking such, maybe call it lunatic fringe questions as what's the total possibility set to focus on with this customer segment or section of the market. Instead, now it's a mass market question. And so with a fewer number of players, now the question is a bit broader spread. And I would think, like many things, how to make a principally better product is not part of that discussion and how to increase or improve quarterly returns or growth. But at the point we've gotten to now, almost everyone, if not anyone, has a phone or two or three. Wearables, an iPad, a phone, data modems, hotspots, you name it. Line growth is not going to be so amazing anymore unless we start to see embedded modems show up in smart TVs and everything else, and just plug and play stuff. And no more home Wi-Fi, for example, could be yet more line growth. But line growth per head is kind of flattening off at this point. Most folks in the US, for example, have a phone, whoever going to have one, and any other accessories or the sidebar revenue. So at that point, we're asking if we're going to take on more of the broadband, challenge or demand set and move that traffic off or try to attract it away from terrestrial connectivity, vis-a-vis, MSO fiber stuff being competed with favorably wireless networks, then we have a new capacity problem. And if we haven't thought about principally the capacity question primarily, we've been looking at coverage, for example. Go low band, get high power, get it everywhere. Well, now how about density? How do we go from casual use case or voice call or VoLTE type use cases, relatively low bandwidth, to everyone wants a 5 megabit or 10 megabit or 25 megabit stream in parallel. Oh, and by the way, there's 300 users on one sector, and they're not going away. They're not even going to go idle. They're going to be on all day. pass in some traffic, and then we'll have a call like ours right now, Ian, for half an hour or 10 minutes. And now they want 2 meg symmetric. And tonight they're going to watch Netflix. And so these profiles, of course, weren't on anyone's mind, to my knowledge, when we launched, HSPA stuff and UMTS stuff back in the day. And so 3G was this nice IP shim on top of this circuit switched world. Great. It's clear to us that we have to think differently. And even as we came into release 8 and 7, of UMTS and splitting off into LTE, it still didn't come to my attention. It didn't feel as if anyone was considering the bulk, call it volumetric use cases and the continuous connectivity use cases as seriously as a broadband provider would have. So there is some missed call it opportunities there, in the sense that we thought the products were all just talking on a phone and texting. It was really the internet the whole time. And it was maybe just a distraction until that was clear and knocking on the door. And now we're talking about, unlimited plans are leading to just 100% utilization all day. How are we going to mitigate that issue while still supporting our networks and growing and expanding? And where is it going to come from? And so the belief, again, gets back to must-have content, must-have captive portals, walled gardens, you name it, to corral something into a space you can charge for. I don't think that's a good strategy, given what we've done, and it was working pretty well. And we could return to, if my one wish would be granted by some communications genie at some point.
So I normally end, you and I have been on many panels before, and we've spoken before. I normally end with what keeps you awake at night, but I think you've answered that. So, so I'm going to flip it around. You talked about Raleigh and Tampa and Austin, where I am. If we were to do this again in a year, 18 months, where do you think we're going to be at? Looking ahead, what do you think we're going to be talking about then, and as the opportunities, or where we're at with infrastructure, etc.?
I think we'll be probably talking about the same problem, and it may be worse. I think it's going to be, wow, we saw this in March and April and nothing changed still. I mean, there is one thing that puts me a little bit at ease, and that is the T-Mobile Sprint merger was approved. Mm-hmm. And we've already seen technical evidence that various network sharing and elements are there. For example, most of the T-Mobile AWS platforms are supporting the Verizon, not Verizon, but the Sprint PLMNs from a legacy Boost Mobile or other brands they had. Those PLMNs are now on T-Mobile network towers. Great. So that's a good step. We're moving there. We're blending things together. But what we would want to see is that big spigot of capacity turned on, vis-a-vis band 41, TDD, LTE, big MIMO everywhere, but we're not really seeing that yet. Obviously, capital and cash are crunch. So these are the things that would keep me awake at night. And in the state we're in now, I'm concerned about the raw mechanics and finances of that.
Right. So good. Well, Anton, thank you very much. Good talking to you as always.
Likewise, Ian.
For those watching in, we've been chatting with Anton Kapela, who is CTO and co-founder of EdgeMicro. Thank you.